text came 2 days before Thanksgiving, just 8 words. We're keeping it small this year, just us and the kids. No greeting, no happy Thanksgiving, Mom. No invitation, just a quiet slicing away. I read it in the kitchen, still wearing my robe, the faint smell of cinnamon in the air from the spice bread I'd baked that morning. The house was warm, but I felt cold all over. My thumb hovered over the phone screen. I typed, "Okay," with a little smiley face. I stared at it, then deleted it. I tried again. "No worries at all. Enjoy." Backspaced that too. In the end, I sent just 2 words. Understood. Then I put the phone down as gently as I could. Like it might break. Like I might. There was a time not so long ago when Thanksgiving meant laughter in this very kitchen. When the table groaned under the weight of good food and better stories. When my grandkids would burst through the front door with breathless hugs and cold noses, and someone would always yell, "Grandma, the pie smells amazing." But this year, just us and the kids, and I was neither. I stood there in the stillness, the morning light catching the edge of the china cabinet, the good plates, 8 of them, polished silver that hadn't seen daylight since Thomas passed, cloth napkins, still soft from last year's starch, the turkey platter with its tiny hairline crack, all of it waiting, like me. No one said I wasn't welcome, not outright. But when they say, just immediate family, and don't include the woman who held them through fevers, through colic, through scraped knees and spelling bees, that silence has its own language, and I speak it fluently. I walked to the grocery store the next morning, bought a turkey just under 5 pounds. The cashier raised her eyebrows. "Big dinner?" "No," I said, "just me, but I still like the smell." That night, I pulled the recipe card from the box, the one smudged with butter and thyme. I traced the faded ink with my finger. Pumpkin pie, from Mom's kitchen. I rolled the dough slowly, shaped it with care, pressed a little heart into the crust, the way my mother did when I was small, and we still believed holidays meant something fixed and forever. I set the table with the good china anyway. 1 plate, 1 napkin, 1 flickering candle, and a name card that read, "Mom." They didn't leave me a seat, no, but I saved one for myself. And that is where the story begins. It was sometime in late October when I first felt the change. Not loud, not cruel, just colder than it used to be. We were in the kitchen. I was helping Joanna prep for her fall potluck, her church ladies' luncheon, or maybe the school fundraiser, I forget which. I'd come over early, like she asked, to help dice onions and trim the ends off green beans. Nothing fancy. Just a mother doing what she's always done. "Don't worry about that one," Joanna said, reaching past me for a second mixing bowl. "We're doing gluten-free for the kids now. Just set that aside." Her voice wasn't unkind, not sharp, just matter-of-fact. Like I'd offered to wrap a present with the wrong paper. I paused, my hands still holding the garlic press, the same one she used to call magical when she was 10 and too little to mince anything herself. "Oh," I said. "Okay." She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and didn't want to say so. I stood at the sink for a long moment after that, staring out the window while water ran over my hands. It had started to rain, a soft, cold drizzle that made the leaves on the maple trees look darker, almost bruised. "Mom," Joanna called from the dining room, her voice already moving on. "Can you fold the napkins into triangles instead of fans this time? We're keeping it simple." Simple, that word stuck. I dried my hands, folded the napkins the way she asked, and tried not to let the quiet inside me grow too large. When the doorbell rang, one of her friends arriving early, I stepped back automatically, picked up my purse. "I'll head out," I said lightly. "Let you ladies have your time." "Oh yeah," Joanna said, like it hadn't occurred to her that I was still there. "Thanks, Mom. I'll bring you some leftovers." Leftovers. I smiled, said thank you, walked out into the gray drizzle without my umbrella, not because I'd forgotten it, but because I didn't feel like going back in. That night, I sat in my own kitchen and reheated the soup I'd made the day before. Split pea, heavy on thyme, just the way Joanna used to like it. I spooned it into a chipped bowl and sat alone at the table, listening to the wind push leaves across the patio. I pictured her laughing in a kitchen that once felt like part mine, wearing an apron I gave her 2 Christmases ago, the one with little pumpkins on it. She said she loved it. But that was before gluten-free, before simple, before just us and the kids. A few days later, we spoke on the phone. It was nothing. Ordinary. She needed a recipe, my cornbread stuffing. "Not the heavy one, Mom. Just something light. The kids won't eat the dense kind." I opened the old recipe book while we talked, my fingers flipping through pages soft with flour and age. "I can make it for you," I offered. There was a pause on her end. "That's sweet," she said, "but we've got it covered this year." It didn't sting. Not right away. It just lingered, like a note left unsung at the end of a melody. I closed the book, set it down gently. She chatted on about schedules and costumes and how Ethan had lost another tooth. I listened. I always listen. But part of me felt like I'd already left the room. Later that week, I took the turkey platter down from the top shelf to wash it, just in case. It still had the faint hairline crack on one side. The one Thomas used to joke gave it character. "Like us," he'd say with a wink. A little cracked, but still holding everything together. I ran my fingers over it slowly. Still solid, still enough. As I dried it with a linen towel, I remembered a different Thanksgiving. Joanna was 13. Her first time baking a pie all by herself. She burned the crust, cried in the bathroom, and wouldn't come out. I'd sat on the floor outside the door with 2 spoons and a tub of whipped cream. "We'll scoop the middle out," I said. "No one eats crust anyway." She laughed through her tears and opened the door. That was a long time ago. Before gluten-free, before polite boundaries and email invitations that never came. Before the first time I was almost invited and wasn't. Now I know what you might be thinking, that it's just a holiday, just a dinner, that people grow up, grow busy, grow apart. I've told myself all those things, but there's a difference between being forgotten and being set aside. One is accident, the other intention. And this shift was not an accident. Still, I told myself it was fine. I'd make my own dinner, set my own table. But part of me, the part that remembers Joanna's little hands holding sweet potatoes like treasure, or Thomas humming while he carved the turkey part of me, knew this was the first quiet erasure, the first plate not counted, the first chair left empty on purpose. You don't notice it at first. Not really. It starts as small things. A missed call returned a day later. A birthday card signed, "Love the Johnsons," instead of "Love Joanna." A story repeated twice, because no one heard you the first time, and no one pretends they did. You learn to stop telling the stories. I still wake up early. Old habits don't die. They soften into ritual. By 6 a.m., the house is already breathing with warmth. I boil water in the old kettle, not the new one Joanna got me last Christmas, that beeps and glows blue. That one feels too loud, too modern, like something that doesn't need me to touch it to work. I prefer the kettle that whistles. It needs me. Breakfast is half a grapefruit, a piece of toast, one pat of butter, and tea steeped in a china cup. Not because I'm delicate, but because I need at least one thing in the day to feel like grace. I eat at the kitchen table, the one with 3 chairs now instead of 4. One I gave away to a neighbor's niece. She's just starting out, and I figured, what's the use of a 4th chair when no one sits in it? The kitchen is clean. Always. Too clean. I wipe things that aren't dirty. Straighten towels no one touches. Fold napkins I won't use. I polish the silver once a month, though no one has eaten from it in years. It's not about utility anymore. It's about remembering that I mattered enough to keep things ready. I keep the house quiet. No television during the day. Just the tick of the clock above the pantry door and the creak of the floorboard near the back step. Sometimes I'll put on the radio. Classical, mostly. Chopin in the mornings. Something slow and familiar. I like the way it fills the corners without interrupting my thoughts. On Tuesdays, I walk to the library. Not for books, for movement, for proof that I can still cross the street and be seen. Mrs. Tanner, the librarian, always waves. She's younger than me by 10 years, but still calls me ma'am. I think she means it kindly. I check out cookbooks I don't cook from anymore. Sometimes I just sit in the reading corner and pretend to flip pages. It's easier than sitting in my own house, where the quiet feels personal. Last week, I saw Ethan, Joanna's youngest, on the sidewalk with his backpack slung too low and his shoes untied. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did, but he didn't wave. I don't blame him. He's 13. 13-year-olds don't wave at old ladies anymore. Even if that old lady was the first person to hold him after the nurse. Even if I still keep the drawing, he made me stick figures and hearts taped inside the pantry door. Joanna used to call every Sunday. Now it's once a month, if that. And when she does, it's efficient. Hi, Mom, just checking in. Her voice clipped, her background always busy. A microwave beeping, a dog barking, a child needing something. I wait for her to ask how I am. She rarely does. And when I tell her anyway, the doctor said the arthritis is creeping into the other knee. She answers with a bright, "Oh no," and changes the subject. Something about the school bake sale, or how she and Greg might start intermittent fasting. I nod, though she can't see me. I've learned to keep my sentences short, just enough to let her feel like we talked. One day I told her I'd made apple butter from scratch. She said, "Oh, nice," and launched into how Ethan's braces were delayed. I stopped mentioning my apple butter after that. It's not that I'm unloved. I don't believe that. It's just that I've become part of the scenery, a background hum, the wallpaper of their lives. They're comforting, quiet, but not noticed unless I peel or crack. I used to be the voice that soothed fevers, the hands that found every lost sock, the lap that held 2 children at once while singing off-key lullabies. Now I'm the name on a group text, a face in a frame by the stairs they pass without looking, the woman who once was the center, now peripheral. I'm not angry. I want that to be clear. But there's a particular kind of ache in being gently set aside, not with cruelty, but with ease. Ease is what hurts most, because it means forgetting doesn't even take effort. Last Friday, I opened the guest room closet and pulled down the box labeled Thanksgiving. Inside, cloth napkins, a tiny stuffed turkey Joanna made in second grade, and my mother's old gravy boat. White ceramic with a delicate gold rim. I cradled it like something alive. They don't use gravy boats anymore. Joanna told me last year, it's easier to just pour it from the pan. I don't argue, but I polished it anyway, just in case. I folded the napkins, even though I wouldn't need them. I placed one plate on the table just to see how it looked. Then I put everything back in the box, because Thanksgiving hadn't been mentioned this year. Not yet, not even once. But I already knew. The seat they wouldn't save was mine. So I began, slowly, deliberately, saving space for myself. It was Thanksgiving, 1997. The kitchen smelled of sage, butter, and cinnamon, the sacred trinity of that day. Thomas stood at the counter in his flannel shirt, carving the turkey with that proud, exaggerated flourish he always used when the kids were watching. "Drumstick, anyone?" he called out, grinning. Greg, our son, raised his hand high like he was 10 again, though he was already 22 with a car payment and a girlfriend who made her own cranberry sauce. Joanna was helping me plate the stuffing. Her hair curled at the ends from steam, her cheeks pink from the oven heat. She wore my old apron, the one with faded sunflowers, and hummed along to the Perry Como record, spinning softly in the corner. The table, my mother's old walnut, was stretched to its full length. 12 chairs, every one of them full. Thomas had lit the candles, even though it was still light out. "For mood," he'd said, tapping one with a wink. The grandkids were little then. Ethan still in a high chair, his face already sticky with mashed yams. Lily clutching a spoon like a sword, declaring she'd only eat rolls and nothing else. And nobody minded. Nobody rushed. Nobody checked their phones. They didn't exist. We just belonged. Together. I remember what it felt like to be essential. To be called Mom or Grandma, with that upward lilt that meant love, not obligation. Back then, my pies were devoured before they cooled. My stories were asked for, not tolerated. I was the first person they called when the turkey looked too pale or the cranberries didn't set. The authority on giblet gravy. The judge of pie crusts. The one who knew how to fold the napkins so they stood like little fans. They called my name across rooms, held up their plates with trust, asked questions they didn't need to ask just to keep me talking. I didn't have to earn my seat. It was just mine. I remember Thomas glancing at me from across the table, his eyes warm, one corner of his mouth lifting like it always did when he saw me laughing. "You did good, Mar," he said that night. Quiet, but full. He meant the meal, but also the family. He always saw both. After dinner, the children tumbled into the den, little limbs sprawled like starfish across the carpet, the television low, their bellies full. Joanna brought me tea in the sunflower mug I still use now. She curled up beside me on the couch, rested her head on my shoulder like she used to when she had nightmares about thunderstorms. "We should do this every year," she whispered, "just like this." And we did, for a while. Even after Thomas passed in 2004, we kept the tradition. Smaller, yes, quieter, but still together. They came because they wanted to, because it mattered, because I mattered. But time is a slippery thing. Now the sunflower apron stays folded in a drawer no one opens. The 12-chair table lives in the garage under a tarp. The record player hasn't spun in years. And the last time I made a full pie, it went untouched. Joanna said the kids don't really eat sweets anymore. But I remember. I remember it all. The clatter, the laughter, the love. The year Ethan drew a picture of a turkey with 6 legs and handed it to me like it was art worthy of the Louvre. The year Lily accidentally dropped a cranberry on the cat, and we laughed until our stomachs hurt. The year Greg and Joanna argued about politics, then made up over pie. The year Thomas fell asleep in his chair with his fork still in his hand. I hold those years like beads on a string, turning them slowly in my mind. Not to hurt myself, not to linger in sadness, but to remind myself I was once the heart of it all. I was once their home. So when the text came this year, just us and the kids, it wasn't just a change in plans. It was a rupture in the ritual, a reminder that I had become optional, that my apron no longer matched the aesthetic, that my stories didn't suit their rhythm, that my seat could quietly, painlessly disappear. But I remember who I was. I remember a full house. I remember Joanna saying, "We couldn't do Thanksgiving without you." I remember being seen, and that memory, soft as it is, holds me upright now. Because even when they forget, I still remember. And remembering is a kind of rebellion, a kind of grace, a quiet, powerful kind of love. The Tuesday before Thanksgiving, the sky was soft with cloud, that kind of gray that makes the world look like it's been exhaled. I'd just finished ironing the linen tablecloth, not because I expected company, but because the corners had started to curl from too many months folded in a drawer, and I wanted it to look like it used to. Old things need that extra care. I set it over the kitchen table, not the big one in the garage, just the small round one I use now. The hem draped neatly, hanging like memory. I smoothed it twice with both hands. That's when the phone buzzed. Not a ring, just the soft vibration on the counter that makes you stop breathing for a second. I reached for it without thinking. "Hey, Mom. Hope you're doing well. Quick question. Do you still have that big roasting pan with the handles?" It was from Joanna. I stared at it. My thumb hovered above the screen. For a brief, trembling moment, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the beginning of something. Maybe they forgot to include me in the text, but they didn't mean to. Maybe she'll follow this with, "We've changed our minds. You're coming, of course." Maybe there's still a seat, still a roll with extra butter, still a grandchild who remembers how I used to let them sneak olives before dinner. So I typed, "Yes, I have it. I'd be happy to bring it by if you'd like." I watched the little bubble appear. Joanna is typing. And then it stopped. A minute passed, then 2. Then the bubble came back. "No need to bring it, just wondering. We're borrowing Greg's. Thanks, though." That was it. No follow-up. No, "What are you doing for Thanksgiving?" No, "We'd love to have you." Just a simple, efficient transaction. I stared at the message longer than I should have. I set the phone down as if it might shatter. Outside, a single leaf tapped at the window. The wind wasn't harsh, just steady. I watched it fall. A slow, spiraling drop that seemed too graceful for what it was. Loss. I walked to the drawer and opened it quietly, the one where I keep the place cards. There were still 12 in there. Little folded tents of cream paper with names written in ink. that had started to fade. Thomas, Greg, Joanna, Ethan, Lily, and one that just said, Mom. I took that one out. I set it on the table next to the silver napkin ring and the one unchipped plate, just in case, because hope, like grief, is stubborn. You don't always invite it. Sometimes it arrives unannounced, sits on your shoulder, and whispers things you can't help but believe for a moment. Like, maybe they'll realize, maybe they'll call, maybe they'll remember that I taught Joanna how to make pie crust so flaky it would melt in your mouth. That I kept the same gravy boat safe for 37 years. That I've never missed a Thanksgiving. Not one. Until now. That night, I lit a candle in the window. Not for them. Not yet. Just because I like the way the flame moves. Steady, but not still. It flickered against the glass while I stood at the sink and washed a pot I hadn't used that day. Tomorrow, I'd go to the store, buy a small turkey just under 5 pounds. Not because I expected anyone, just because I still like the smell. But that moment, the phone buzz, the typing bubble, the roasting pan, I think that was my last flicker of maybe. Maybe they just forgot. Maybe this year was a fluke. Maybe I still belonged. But now, I know better. They asked for the pan, not the person who used to fill it. I blew out the candle before bed. The room smelled faintly of wax and a little like resignation. Not bitterness, just stillness. And in that stillness, something inside me folded itself up, neat and quiet, like a letter never sent. Thanksgiving morning arrived like any other gray light stretching thin across the curtains. The chill in the air curling around my ankles before I'd even swung my leg out of bed. I sat up slowly, my hands bracing against the mattress. My joints whispered their familiar complaints, my knees, my back, that little knot in my right shoulder that always blooms in the cold. It was 5:47 a.m. I'd always risen early on Thanksgiving, even before Thomas passed, even when the kids were small and the house was loud. Even when I'd barely slept the night before, worrying if the turkey would thaw in time or if we had enough marshmallows for the sweet potatoes. I rose early because the house needed me. Now I rise out of habit, not because anyone needs anything, just because it's how I'm stitched together. I moved through the morning like someone who still believes the rhythm means something. I put on soft music instrumental, low, started peeling potatoes. Not many, just enough for one. I whispered to no one in particular, mashed taste better fresh. It felt silly as soon as I said it, but I didn't stop. I chopped onions. My eyes watered, not from the onions. The kitchen stayed quiet, too quiet. The phone didn't ring. I didn't expect it to, but still, I kept glancing at it, like someone might change their mind at the last moment. Like someone might say, "What were we thinking? Of course you belong here." But the screen stayed dark. I lit a candle anyway, set out the cloth napkin, the china plate, one fork, one knife, the gravy boat with nothing in it, the name card that just said, Mom. I looked at it a long time, and that's when it hit me. Not all at once, not like a blow, but slowly, like fog, like sleep creeping in after too many days awake. I was tired. Not physically, though, yes, that too, but deeper than that. Tired of being remembered when it was convenient. Tired of being the emergency contact, but never the first invitation. Tired of being spoken to in texts and half smiles. Tired of being needed only for recipes or money or memories. Tired of folding myself into smaller and smaller spaces so others could stretch out guilt-free. Tired of saving them a seat while mine stayed empty. I sat at the table. The food was warm. The silence was not. And something in me, something I didn't even know, had been clinging to the edges. Just to let go. A kind of quiet that wasn't peace, but surrender. Not bitter, just final. I ate slowly, each bite an echo of meals that once fed more than hunger. I didn't cry. I haven't cried in years. Not since Thomas's funeral, when I sat in the front row and realized I was now the oldest person in the room. Since then, tears have felt performative, like I'd be crying for someone to see it, and no one sees me now. Not really. So I chewed, swallowed, set my fork down. I thought of Joanna's kitchen, the one I helped her renovate, the countertops I wrote a check for, the stove she swore would be for family dinners. I pictured her table, full, and mine, not. And the ache wasn't sharp. It was dull, familiar, like the final chord of a song no one sings anymore. When dinner was done, I wrapped the rest of the pie, put half in the fridge, just in case, because old habits die last. I carried a plate into the living room, set it down next to the photo of Thomas. His smile frozen in time, that day at the lake when his hair wouldn't stay down. I saved you a slice, I said softly. The house didn't answer, but he would have. He would have said, "Thanks, sweetheart," with that crinkle in his eyes and a kiss to my cheek. I stared at the candle in the window, its flame swaying just slightly, and I thought, not for the first time, I used to be someone's favorite person. Now I am their fated emergency contact, their gentle inconvenience, their polite omission. That night, I didn't turn on the television, didn't wash the good fork. I sat in the dark for a long time, not sad, not angry, just still. Because when the world forgets you gradually, it doesn't rip anything away. It just stops reaching for you. And eventually, you stop reaching back. The candle had nearly burned down. Its little wax pool trembled, flickering shadows against the kitchen walls. I sat at the table long after the food had gone cold, the pie wrapped, the plate in the living room still untouched beside Thomas's photo. I hadn't moved in over an hour, and I wasn't thinking about anything in particular, just breathing, just being. And then, somewhere between the third sip of lukewarm tea and the sound of the fridge humming to life, it came to me, not a plan, not even a sentence. Just a soft truth I hadn't been willing to say aloud. This can't be it. Not out of desperation, but clarity. Because I had done everything right. I had raised them with kindness, showed up with casseroles and cards, paid bills when they needed it, watched babies when they were tired, listened without interrupting, even when I knew better. I had bent and softened and waited for years, and it hadn't changed anything. If anything, it had made it easier for them to forget, because I made forgetting convenient. I made absence feel polite, and I realized no one was going to give me a seat unless I stopped acting like I didn't need one. I looked around my kitchen. The linen cloth was still smooth. The china gleamed. The name card in front of me, Mom, sat at an angle, its edge curling slightly. I reached out, straightened it. That small gesture, that tiny correction, felt like something more than habit. It felt like decision. I didn't know what I would do yet. Not exactly, but I knew what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't keep making dinner for people who didn't come. I wouldn't set extra places for ghosts. I wouldn't pretend this was enough, because I deserved more than crumbs of acknowledgement. I deserved more than recycled affection and once-a-month phone calls with baked-in apologies. I used to believe that love meant doing things without being asked, that loyalty meant waiting quietly in the wings, ready when they needed me. But now I saw it for what it was. A story I told myself to avoid the truth. The truth was, they liked me small, contained, predictable. The truth was, they preferred the version of me who asked for nothing. But that version had grown thin, transparent, and suddenly, in the flicker of a fading candle, I saw her, saw myself, not as a disappointment, not as a burden, but as a woman who once filled a house with warmth, who once carried everyone, who still after everything had enough grace to make a pie with a heart in the crust. That woman deserved more than silence. I stood slowly, knees creaking, carried my plate to the sink, washed it clean, dried it. I folded the cloth napkin, smoothed it into a perfect square, and then, without ceremony, I blew out the candle. The room went dim, but not dark. I stood there for a moment, letting my eyes adjust, letting my heart settle around this new knowledge, not heavy, not sharp, just real. Something has to change, not because I want to punish them, but because I want to find myself again, whoever that is, whatever that means. I walked into the living room, picked up the untouched plate beside Thomas's photo. I think I need a new tradition, I whispered. The photo didn't answer, but it didn't need to. Thomas always understood before I found the words. I sat down on the sofa, turned on the lamp, and pulled the knitting basket onto my lap. Not because I wanted to finish anything, just because my hands needed to move. As I worked, I thought, next year, maybe I'll go somewhere. Maybe I'll cook for someone who actually shows up. Maybe I'll light a candle knot for the people who forgot me, but for the woman I used to be, and the woman I'm becoming. Maybe I won't even make a turkey. Maybe I'll make lasagna, just because I can. And suddenly, it didn't feel like a fantasy. It felt like the beginning. The next morning, I woke before the sun again. Not because I had to. Not because there was a turkey to baste or pies to cool, but because I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Stillness, but not emptiness. I pulled on my sweater, the soft gray one with the small tear at the cuff I always meant to mend. Slipped on my shoes, and instead of turning to the kitchen to make tea, I walked to the hall closet and pulled down the photo albums. Not the digital ones, not the curated prints Joanna made that one year through some app. No, these were the real ones. Thick, leather-bound, heavy in the hand, with plastic sleeves that crackled when you turned the page. I sat at the table, the same one I'd set yesterday for one, and opened the first album. There we were, me, Thomas, and the kids. Joanna in pigtails, Greg in suspenders, Thanksgiving 1989. I was holding a ladle, mid-laugh. Someone must have said something funny. I looked. Full. Not just in the arms or the smile. Full in spirit. I flipped the pages slowly. Camping trips. Snow days. First days of school. Sleepy babies and birthday cakes and picnics on patchy grass. I remembered every detail. The way Joanna used to lean against me when she was tired. The way Greg used to race into the house, yelling, "Mom!" like the word itself was a gift. I kept turning the pages until I reached the final album, the one I hadn't opened in years. It ended around the time Thomas passed. After that, the photos thinned. Fewer smiles, fewer gatherings, more portraits mailed to me in stiff holiday cards. I closed the album and sat with it in my lap for a long time. And then, without thinking too much, I stood up and walked to the hall closet again. This time, I reached for the old suitcase. Not the small one I use for overnights. The big one, with the wheels that squeak and the zipper that sticks. I opened it on the bed, and I began to pack. Not in a hurry, not out of spite, but with purpose. A warm coat, a scarf Thomas once said made my eyes look kind, 2 books, my favorite cardigan, the teacup I liked best, a pair of walking shoes. Then I walked to the bookshelf and pulled down a map. I hadn't used it in years, but the folds still knew where to bend. I traced my finger along the coast, stopped at a little town we once passed through on our anniversary trip. Thomas had said, "I'd like to come back here someday, just you and me, stay in a place with lace curtains and peach cobbler." I circled it. Why not? Why not go for a few days? Why not eat someone else's pie for a change? Why not wake up in a place where no one knows me by my sacrifices, but just sees a woman enjoying her day? The phone buzzed once. A group message, a photo of Joanna's table, children laughing, plates full. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I reached for the ticket envelope I'd printed earlier that morning, tucked it inside my purse. Train leaves tomorrow, 7 to 15 a.m. I won't tell them. I don't have to. This isn't about proving anything. It's about remembering I still have places to go, things to see, tea to drink, people to smile at, even if just strangers on a bench. I zipped the suitcase, smoothed the cardigan on top, and stood by the window. Outside, a single leaf clung to the branch. It shivered, held on, then let go, floating not with panic, but with grace. Tomorrow I would take a train, sit by the window, watch the towns pass by, and know without question. They didn't save me a seat, but I set one for myself. The sun had nearly set when I stood in the doorway of the living room, suitcase already packed, coat draped over the armchair. The house felt still not empty, but different, not like it was waiting anymore, like it understood something had ended and something else had begun. I moved slowly, not out of fatigue, but reverence. I wanted to mark the moment, to feel it, to make sure it didn't pass by unnoticed, like so many others had. I walked to the hutch where the silver candlesticks waited. Thomas had polished them every December, even when his hands had started to shake. Tradition, he'd say. Some things ought to shine, even when we don't feel like it. I chose the left one, the same one we always lit for guests who hadn't arrived yet. I carried it to the window ledge. It was a wide sill, deep with age. You could sit on it, knees drawn up, and watch the snow if you wanted. I had once or twice when the kids were little and the house still felt too loud. Now, I set the candle down gently. I lit it with a match, not a lighter. I like the sound a match makes, the scratch and flare, like a beginning. The flame caught quickly. It danced just a little. I stood there and watched it flicker. Not for them, not anymore. This candle wasn't a beacon for their return. It wasn't an offering, or a hope, or a signal that I was still here if they changed their minds. No, this was a candle for me, for the woman who had spent her life showing up, who baked the pies, folded the napkins, took the photos, paid the bills, kept the peace. For the woman who once set 12 places and now understood the power in setting just one and meaning it. For the mother who had learned that silence from your children isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's simply who they've become, and for the grandmother who knew love wasn't always returned, but gave it anyway. Because giving is who she is. But waiting, that part she can leave behind. I didn't leave a note. I didn't tape a letter to the fridge or send a pointed text. That's not how this ends. Instead, I walked into the hallway and looked up at the family portrait. The one from 1997, all of us in front of the fireplace, wearing sweaters 2 sizes too big and grins too wide to hold. I took it down. Not in anger, not in grief. I wrapped it in brown paper, gently, and placed it in the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. That season of life was beautiful, but it was over, and I no longer needed to keep it on the wall like a doorway back. I walked to the window one last time. The candle flickered steadily now. Outside, the street was quiet. A dog barked 2 doors down. Someone's porch light clicked on. I pressed my hand to the glass. I was here, I whispered, and I mattered. Then I turned off the lights, not to disappear, but to rest, to ready myself for tomorrow, for a seat of my own choosing, a table not defined by absence, a life that glows, even quietly. The train pulled away just as the sun breached the horizon. Through the window, the world blurred into soft golds and gentle blues, houses shrinking into dots, fields rolling out like ribbon, the silhouettes of trees standing quiet and unbothered. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, suitcase tucked beneath the seat, cardigan draped over my shoulders. I hadn't told anyone where I was going, not because I wanted to make a point, but because, for the first time in years, I wasn't living my life as a reaction to theirs. I was simply living it. The little town came into view by noon. It looked just as I remembered, maybe a little quieter, maybe a little smaller. A main street with flower boxes, a cafe with chipped mugs, and a bookstore where nothing was alphabetized, but every title was loved. I checked into the inn with the lace curtains and the peach cobbler. The woman at the desk asked if I was here to visit family. No, I said, smiling. Just myself. She nodded like that made perfect sense. I liked that. That evening, I took a walk through the quiet streets, passing porches wrapped in soft light and windows glowing with stories I didn't need to be part of. I didn't feel left out. I felt full, whole, like someone who had stepped out of the margins and back onto the page. I stopped at a small bakery and bought a single tart. Raspberry. The woman behind the counter gave me 2 forks, assuming I wasn't alone. I kept both. And later, in my little room, with the patchwork quilt and the ticking clock, I used 1 fork and set the other on the nightstand. Just because. I didn't hear from Joanna that week. No calls, no messages, just the same silence I'd grown used to. But for the first time, it didn't land inside me like a bruise. It floated past. Because silence only hurts when you think it means something about you. And I no longer did. I wasn't the absence at their table. I wasn't the empty chair. I was the woman who taught them how to set the table in the first place. I was the woman who carved turkeys and stories and safe places. And now, I was the woman who bought her own train ticket, packed her own bag, and sat in the glow of her own becoming. On my last night in the town, I lit a candle in the windowsill of the inn, the same way I always did at home. But this time, I didn't light it in waiting. I lit it as a beacon not for someone else, but for myself. A reminder that I was still here, that I was not fading, that I had not been erased. That love, real love, begins with remembering your own name and speaking it aloud when no one else does. I don't know what comes next. Maybe they'll call. Maybe they won't. Maybe next Thanksgiving, I'll travel again. Or maybe I'll stay home and invite someone who's also been forgotten. Maybe I'll cook a feast for one, or just have soup and a slice of tart. But whatever I do, it won't be from a place of waiting. It will be from presence, from choice, from worth. Because this year, I didn't sit by the phone. I didn't leave a place card at an empty table. I didn't hope someone would remember me. I remembered myself. And in that remembering, I found something better than inclusion. I found peace, quiet, earned, mine. They didn't save me a seat, but I saved space for myself. And that was enough.